Ether is it's a substance. So it's the idea that space is filled with a fluid substance. It's a very, very thin fluid. So unlike water, for example, which is like a thick fluid, very dense, and then you've got air, which is a thinner fluid, that we can move around. Well, ether is like even thinner than air, so thin that it basically penetrates everything. So when you're walking around, you're walking through the air. It's like the air is going around you as you walk, but the ether would be just going right through you. We're embedded in it. It's analogous to space, to the idea of space, basically. But instead of space being empty, space is actually full of this substance called ether. This gives a scientific basis for spirituality, because alchemy is a spiritual science. It's all about the human soul, and modern science has rejected the human soul.
And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Being Human. I am delighted to say I'm here with Steve Young, or Dr. Steve Young, and he's an author of the book A Fool's Wisdom, Science, Conspiracies, and the Secret Art of Alchemy. And I've been following your work, Steve, for a number of years. I just love what you do. There's so much power in the stories that you tell in this book. You've given me an entirely new kind of understanding of science, an appreciation for scientism, and then the work on alchemy has been fantastic. So just so excited to have you on. Welcome.
Thanks very much, Richard. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I know we had a little bit of trouble connecting originally. It was like there was some conspiracy to stop us from connecting, but we finally overcame it, I think, on the fourth attempt. And now we're here talking. So yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure. So let's start. Start the start with you. Yeah, I'd love to learn some of your backstory. Where you grew up, some of your early influences that ultimately had you develop the interests that you now have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up in Scotland, in Fife, where I am now, actually, near Dundee or near St Andrews. I'm kind of in between those two towns. And I'm back here now as well. So I did leave for a while. I went to university in St Andrews, my undergraduate degree, master's in theoretical physics. And then I went down south to Guildford, where I did a PhD in theoretical nuclear physics at the University of Surrey. Before that, I did have a lot of interest in music and maths and physics and chemistry. They were like my main sort of interests when I was young. I was able to pursue that. I was able to do an undergraduate degree. We had grants in those days. I don't know if they still do grants, but if you got the school grades, you got your tuition paid for. University. So I was one of the lucky few to do that. So I didn't have to pay tuition. I got my master's in theoretical physics. I had started out studying astrophysics. That was going to be my degree, but then I switched during the degree to theoretical physics, which just seemed more interesting because, astrophysics is pretty boring actually when you get into it. It sounds very exciting, but it was just like, It was not interesting at all. So I was more interested in quantum theory, and this was the theoretical degree. So I switched my degree after 2 years to theoretical physics, and that's what I ended up with my master's in. So this was very heavily quantum theory. I did maybe 6 different modules on quantum theory. 1, 2, 3, advanced quantum physics, quantum field theory, all this stuff. It was super. It was like a degree in quantum, essentially. But I found it all super fascinating. I wanted to continue, learning about this stuff. And so a PhD seemed like the way to go. So I found an opportunity in Guildford at University of Surrey, and it's theoretical nuclear physics. So essentially you're modeling nuclear reactions, with equations and computer simulations. So I spent 4 years doing that. I was meant to be 3, but it took 4 because, it just takes a long time. It's really, really complex stuff. It takes ages to understand. first of all, what you're doing, and then to actually then write the code and, do the simulations, just takes a lot of time. Sometimes it would take like weeks to just like run the code, to get it to like spit out like one number, which was the wrong number, so you got to like go back and debug it and stuff. It was, very, very tedious, like stressful work in like a dusty little office with no windows, that kind of thing. But anyway, I got through it. I completed it. I wrote a thesis, which is around here somewhere. Actually, no, it's over on the bookshelf there. But so I wrote the thesis, which is all about modeling this one specific type of nuclear reaction. Well, I say nuclear reaction. I mean, essentially what it was a beam of light incident on a piece of lithium. It's a piece of lithium metal. Now, essentially modeling what would happen when a laser beam of a particular energy interacts with lithium. Like what happens? Where does the energy go? Kind of a simple, thing, a simple experiment, but you're modeling it with all this quantum physics, and it's actually like really, really complex calculations to model that kind of thing. But anyway, I did it, and it was all good. I got through it. I got the doctorate, and then I came out into the real world in it would have been towards the end of 2004, and I couldn't get a job. I was like, I just had no skills that were appealing to employers, and I was going from like
with all that mathematical ability.
Yeah, well, I was going from one recruitment agency to the other, and they're just like, they're looking at my CV and they're like, well, it all sounds very impressive. They're like, but what can you actually do? The fact is, the code that I'd been working with was like Fortran, programming language, this ancient programming language that no one uses anymore. So I wasn't skilled as a programmer to be able to get a job as a programmer or anything. And all the math, all the calculus and tensors and matrix mechanics and everything like that, no use to anybody. And so it was like, I was basically just, I had a qualification, and I ended up working in IT consultancy. And, this was because a lot of these consultancy companies, they hire PhDs, they like to have PhDs on their staff. But, I wasn't being hired for my skills. I was being hired for, having the appearance of being intellectual, right? For them to have PhDs on their staff, it seems like they have a more intellectual staff, right? But the work I was actually doing was pretty boring. I was basically testing contactless payment cards. So the PayPass that we have now. So back in those days, that stuff was like exciting new technology. And I was working with MasterCard basically to write the specifications for like how the terminal talks to the card and all that kind of stuff. So it was very low level work with smart cards and financial transactions. I did that for 5 years. But as I say, music was always an interest since I was a kid. So I've been DJing, at parties and things since I was at school, and making music on my computer when I was at home and stuff like that. And it started to seem like that could be actually something that I could do for a living. And it was around 2010, I actually just quit my job. And it was on its way out anyway. The company I worked for was a startup, and they grew from I was the second employee, and then we grew to 12 people, and then it just collapsed back down until I was basically the first one in, the last one out, so it was pretty stressful. But,
and this was in Norwich, is that right?
In Norwich, yeah.
I say that because all of my dad's side of my family are from Norwich, so I know Norwich very well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed living in Norwich. Actually, I was there for 10 years, and so for 5 of those years I was working, and then for 5 of those years I was just doing music full time. Which really just consisted of just getting up, working on music every day, and saying yes to every offer that I got. Basically, if I got offered to play a show or just anything, I would just say yes. So I was like, that was like my whole strategy for it. It was like anything that offers to do with music, I will just take it, but I'll do my best. I'll learn from it, and just take what I can. So yeah, that was did that for 10 years basically, and it was it had its ups and downs, but I managed to sustain it and keep it going until 2020. It was like I tried my damnedest, like after COVID, to just keep going. I'm like, this isn't going to stop me, with my career. But eventually it was just like, I mean, I haven't stopped. I still do put music out, but I've been pretty much kicked out of the music industry altogether. But I still make music for the love of it, So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I after all the stuff kicked off with COVID, I was a skeptic from the start, actually, so I felt very isolated, by everyone really, other than my own family. So yeah, this was obviously 2020, 21, 22 were like really tough years, like going through quite a lot, and facing a lot of truth, hard truths, like about the world, but also about myself, about my own life. And so there was a real, like, I'd say, dark night of the soul, throughout those years. And I thought, what am I going to do? Because I'm never going to be able to be a successful, celebrated musician anymore, all this kind of stuff. Because I've been, this COVID thing had just like split the world, like, so, such a stark division that happened there. Maybe the biggest division, the world's ever had. It seems like every family, every group, every business, has been touched by this, like split up by it in some way. So anyway, I thought I got to write a book. I've got to actually just write a book and say what it is that I think about science, because ultimately that's what I came from. That was my background. I'm a doctor of physics, I can't escape it. I have very controversial views on science, and I have to say them because that's my background. Like, if I didn't have the doctorate in physics, I could have just carried on with music, just, screw everything else, just do the music, just be the artist. Right. But because I had this background and I had this very clear picture in my head of what's going on with science, I felt sort of morally obligated to write a book about it. So there we are. So I did, and that's why I'm here. So
yeah. Thank you. Wow, thank you. So it's interesting that you said you were always a skeptic, and yet you devoted a huge part of your life to study within the confines of, I suppose, the traditional scientific paradigm. So, what were you skeptical about?
Well, no, sorry, I didn't say I was always a skeptic. I just said with COVID, I was skeptical from the start. So,
you were skeptical from the start of that. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I didn't believe in the virus or the vaccines or anything, like, from the beginning. So I was very, skeptical about that. And I mean, because I'd spent some time in Central America. I was in Central America in 2015 for 6 months. And during that time, they were running a similar pandemic type situation over there called Zika virus. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Yeah,
Zika. So we were living in Central America, and everywhere they were broadcasting there's this virus going around. It's being carried by mosquitoes, and if you're pregnant and you get bitten by a mosquito, then your baby's going to have a small head. Right? That's what they were telling. So my wife got pregnant as soon as we arrived in Central America, right? So we were in Central America for 6 months. She was pregnant the whole time, and we were being told every day that if we get bitten by mosquitoes, this virus could end up shrinking the baby's head, unless you get the vaccine. So I found it very, very skeptical of what was going on, because they can't even provide like clean water or a stable electricity supply for people. Yet they were coming out to inject them with this cure for this rare jungle-born disease, right? And I thought that makes no sense to me at all. Like, the way, they're going out there to all these like poor people and trying to save them from this brand new rare disease that has just, come out of the jungle or whatever. It just made no sense at all. And then I started to understand it was depopulation. Basically, they're doing horrible things to like people in these third world countries with all that stuff. So that was when my eyes were opened to the vaccination thing. So when COVID kicked off, I was already very skeptical about all that. But prior to that, I had vaccines when I was a kid and everything, secondary school and when I was younger and everything. I don't even know how many I had, but I never had them as an adult. So I'm quite glad about that. So, yeah. And even before that, so going back to 2015, 2016 were a big time of change for me because I left the UK. I went to Central America for 6 months, and then I lived in North America in Hawaii for 2.5 years. And so when you take yourself out of the UK and go and live, in the woods in another country, and you don't watch the TV and stuff like that, a lot of the programming that you've like received your whole entire life just starts to melt away and like break away, right? So yeah, one of the first things that happened was about the Earth, the shape and motion of the Earth, right, which is one of the most controversial subjects that there is. So I'd heard that there were these people called flat earthers, and a few people had said to me, you should look into it. And I just thought it was crazy, like everyone else. But eventually I thought, well, it's physics. At the end of the day, we're talking about physics here, the shape of the Earth, the motion of the Earth. So let's have a look into it. And, I was actually just amazed at like how much good stuff there was coming from these so-called crazy, flat earthers or whatever. And I was also amazed just how me with my physics degree, we're talking, let's say like 10 years of physics knowledge, right? Two years of school hires and 6 year studies, plus 4 years undergraduate, plus 4 years postgraduate. And I'm looking at these flat earth things and I didn't know any of it. I knew nothing whatsoever about anything they were saying. And it was obvious that there was, I'd never tried to prove the shape of the Earth. Even though I did physics for 10 years, I never once tried to prove that the Earth was a globe. I just accepted it, like we all do. But when I actually set about trying to prove it, and again, this wasn't until 2015, and I was watching stuff and I was trying stuff out in my own life, and I realized I can't prove this. I can't prove this globe Earth exists. And all the things that I thought were proof of the globe actually are fake. The photographs are fake, all this kind of stuff. There's no evidence of spinning. The horizon's always flat. However high up you go, it's always flat. And of course, you can see further than you're supposed to see. And there's been many examples of this. Like when I was in Hawaii, for example, I could see Maui, right? From the big island on a clear day at the sunset, you can see Maui. It's 104 miles away. It should be 6,000 feet underneath the horizon, right? But you can see it right over there. It's like Loch Ness is another good one in Scotland, right? Loch Ness is 22.5 miles long, perfectly straight loch. And I know someone who works on the lifeboats there. And I just asked him straight up. I was like, can you see from one end of the loch to the other on a clear day? He's like, yeah, of course you can. It's like, well, if you go and do the calculation, the other end of Loch Ness should be about 75 meters below the horizon, but you can see all the way to the beach on the other side, right? So there's examples like this all over the world.
I was just on those because I've seen all of those and it's really opened my eyes. The videos of it. I've never physically gone and tried to look at something beyond what should be the curvature. So one retort to that is that there's refraction, that somehow that there's differences in atmospheric density across that across that patch of atmosphere, that section of atmosphere, and that is causing a refraction of the light, and that's why you can see it. Does that help credence?
It's a bit desperate as an explanation, I would say. I mean, just given the amount of, I guess, so the idea is that the light bends around the curve. And I mean, maybe in a small amount of curvature you could maybe argue that, but in like larger ones, like when something's like 100 miles away, like seeing Maui from the Big Island, for example, it's actually, the calculation is 6,000 feet. It's actually 6,666, by the way. 100 miles is 6,666 feet curvature. And the idea that the whole island that the light would like bend around the ocean and everything, it's just, I think it's a bit clutching at straws, honestly. Not that refraction isn't real as an effect in itself, but using that as the explanation, I think is just a bit clutching at straws, if I'm honest.
And just interesting because for those who are coming to this for the first time, they might be like me, and they're like, okay, what's this guy saying? This sounds absurd. And they start going online, and they're going to find the case against it, right? The case that no, we are living on a, and this is why the flat earthers are wrong. I'm interested in, were there any really strong arguments that initially had you think, maybe the flat earthers are wrong, maybe there is something in this that you had to overcome?
Well, strong arguments in favor of the globe.
In favor of the globe, that that you had to do some digging on.
Oh God, no! I mean, but it took me years, like I said before, I spoke publicly about this, because I thought it was better to wait and see if some case for the globe that I missed comes up.
Right.
But what's actually happened is the case for the globe has just gotten weaker and weaker in like the 10 years or so since I started looking into this. And actually the space propaganda has gotten worse. I would say actually the fake space was more convincing and realistic in the 60s than it is now. I think now they're not even trying to make it realistic. They're just mocking people at this point, I think. And, I've got just countless examples of like mockery in the media. Like if in the space news, like if you go and look up the space news section of any newspaper or whatever, is full of mockery and sexual innuendos. I mean, they're just taking the piss out of people with this stuff now, and so I don't know. I never really heard a good argument for the globe since I started going down this path, but I've heard hundreds of arguments in favor of the flat Earth, and I mean, the first thing I watched was called 200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball, right, by Eric Dubé. Yeah. That was the first documentary I watched. And those 200 proofs are still valid today. And it's based on a book from 1897 called 100 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball. And those 100 proofs are still relevant today, right? The only reason we think we're on this ball is not because of science, it's because of propaganda. It's because of NASA, it's because of the BBC and all these places just spinning globes in our faces all the time. So it was it was enlightening, but also like really hard to deal with. And as I say, so I didn't tell anybody about it. I tried to talk with a few people in private, and they just look at you and they're just like, and so suddenly that's it. The relationship is now ruined, right? Because I just mentioned that, I didn't believe in gravity anymore. And I realized that like, this is a really massive, like taboo subject. But, and it burst onto the internet in 2013, apparently, right? That was when I think Eric Dubé started posting his documentaries, and, millions of people have get it. They get it. I mean, like flat Earth was a massive trending topic in through 2017. It was I think it was around about 2018 they started censoring it hard, and loads of channels just disappeared. Like loads of videos disappeared. Suddenly it was like if you search for flat Earth, rather than getting useful results, you would just get masses of these like cartoony videos about how flat earthers are so stupid and all this, just like propaganda stuff. So it kicked off a full-on like propaganda war, but then when it came to COVID, what I noticed was the only group online who saw through the whole thing from the beginning were the flat earthers. and not a single one of the flat earthers fell for COVID, and I think it's because of the discernment that they trained themselves to discern this kind of stuff, like through studying flat Earth and trying to prove the globe. It gives you very sharp discernment, and so no one fell for COVID. So I had to give the flat earthers credit again. It's like these are smart people, meticulous researchers, and they're not saying this stuff lightly. They're not saying it just to annoy you. It's like they're saying it because they know something. And that's what it says in the Illuminati cards, right? And the Illuminati game, the card game, the card for flat earthers. It says people laugh, but flat earthers know something, right? It is true. They do know something. They're not just trying to annoy you. They're not just crazy. They're actually trying to help you. But it's a funny one. I mean, I can laugh about it now. As I say, it's been 10 years. But for a lot of people, it's still like brand new to look into this stuff.
Well, I did some research before the podcast that in 2018, 4%, this is a YouGov poll, 4% believed in flat Earth. In 2021, EOLES survey, 10% believed. So that's 2021. That's more than a doubling in 3 years. And then on the moon landings, in 1994, 9% believed it was a hoax. In 2024, 12% believe it. And it is far different in the youth. So 25% of the UK youth, 18 to 25, believe that the moon landings were a hoax. In Germany, Spain, and the Netherlands, 35% of young adults believe it was a hoax. So that's, wow. Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a guy about this the other day, and he's like an older guy, like a boomer, as it were, and right. He remembered sitting in front of the TV, watching it as a kid, and I said, well, when did you realize it was a hoax? And he said, well, in the mid-90s, and that was the same for me in the mid-90s. I mean, there was TV, it was actually on the TV. There was, documentaries on mainstream TV about the moon landing and all the suspicious stuff about it and everything. So, they gave us a bone in the 90s to say, this moon landing is sus, even though the government will never admit that it was fake. The fact that they put it out on the mainstream programming tells you they are kind of throwing you a bone a little bit to, give you something to think about. So yeah, but I carried on through my education. I thought the moon landings were fake, but I thought everything else that NASA had done since the moon landings was legit. So they only faked the moon landing, right? Just because it was a race. It was like they wanted to, win the space race. But after that, it was fine. Everything they did was legit. All the Mars stuff and the Hubble telescope and, all this, I believed was completely legitimate. Again, it wasn't until 2015, 2016 started looking and actually, just looking through the stuff on the NASA website. And I don't know, it's like you have new eyes. It's like when you look at that stuff with the eyes of wonder and the eyes of complete trust in authority and the eyes of sci-fi eyes, right? Because I've been watching sci-fi my whole life. I loved sci-fi. It was like my favorite entertainment, So you got sci-fi eyes, you trust the authorities, you got wishful thinking because you're thinking, well, the future is going to be in space. We're all going to be traveling in spaceships and everything. So when you're looking at NASA through those eyes, it all just looks so amazing and great, right? But then when you become skeptical and you start to see how they faked things and, how they lied about things, then you look at it through those eyes. And so there's just red flags everywhere. It's, yeah. So, that... Yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip, man. I know it's such a big thing, but it's also, it's something we need to be able to talk about. Because the way it's set up, like how flat earthers were sort of declared like almost like the enemies of reason. Like there's nothing worse than a flat earther, right? It's like they say it's worse than being gay, right? You're literally in the closet. Afraid to come out and, declare your perspective on things because you get absolutely annihilated. I still get people writing to me now and people who they haven't even read my book, right? They literally just heard that I'm a flat earther. And then that gives them license to write to me and start giving me abuse and stuff like that. And it's like, you even read the book? It's like, no.
Well, it's actually used as just as a sort of epithet, isn't it? It's like if you're loon, it's like synonymous with being a loon, right? Like, you know, you might hear somebody say that's the kind of thing a flat earther would say, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that was the first like sort of big wake up for me. I mean, I talk about another as well, sort of earlier than that, going back to like 2006, 2007. And even before with 9/11, I mean, right, okay, 9/11, the whole zeitgeist thing, that was a real big wake up. But some years after that, I began doing shamanic ceremonies, like ayahuasca ceremonies. I was very interested in this, and those experiences were amazing, really. Where you go like inside yourself, and it's all, you see these amazing visions. You have profound healing experiences and all that. And so this brought me out of the more materialistic, more sort of atheist leanings that I had when I came out of my education. And I sort of accepted that there is this like inner world and that it's like vast, and so I started opening up to more spiritual ideas during that time, and probably got caught up a bit in the New Age movement as well. I think coming from a quantum physics background, so the quantum physics and the New Age movement are actually pretty closely related, and this goes actually way back to ancient Greece, the ancient atomists, the first people to come up with the ideas of atoms. They were actually like hedonists and nihilists, and they didn't believe in God, they didn't believe in sin, right? So they didn't want to, you could basically do whatever you want and not get any consequence for it, right? So they had this whole set of beliefs that were like kind of antithetical to your traditional Christian or spiritual beliefs, and they developed this atomic theory, which is kind of like the embodiment of that belief system. And so this was revived in the 17th century with the scientific revolution. They started explaining everything in terms of these atoms. And then in the 20th century, this then became quantum physics. So quantum physics is basically the new version of atomic physics. And it has this sort of built-in spirituality to it, but it's not I call it a phony hedonistic spirituality. And I was seeing this a lot in the music scene, that there was a lot of people who were, on the one hand, pretending to be spiritual and awake, but on the other hand, they're just like total hedonists, just behaving like absolutely reckless, right? And I thought, well, what is going on here? And honestly, I feel like it's like the subtle programming of the physics theories, not just the physics theories, but the biology theories as well, like evolution and everything. Like all those theories, we're taught them, and they kind of program us to like behave in a certain way or to see the world in a certain way. Like, for example, thinking there's no such thing as sin, which is really, sin is just consequences for bad actions, right? And so a lot of people have rejected sin completely, but sin is in mathematics, it's in physics. Like the sin wave is the same. It's the same thing. It's like you go one way, you go too far one way, you get pushed back the other way. It's like the essence of vibration. And anyway, so yeah, so there's a lot in there. So I had a number of awakenings like that, and then in 2020, just major awakenings. I mean, I was just researching every day, going down all the rabbit holes, right. And I couldn't actually believe that they gave us the internet, because it's like they were taking away everything else, taking away everything else that's good about life, but they left us with the internet. I'm like, well, I'm just going to spend all day researching what you're up to then. So yeah, it was, it's been a wild ride, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's pause on it, because something that I got that was certainly new for me from your book was looking at the atom and atomic theory. So yeah, to tell me your view on sort of from your perspective now on atomic theory and where it breaks down.
Okay, well, the it's the thing is, like, when with any of these things, right, there's like actually three levels to it. You've got philosophy, theory, and practice, and they're quite distinct. And we talk about like compartmentalization. Well, it is like that. The theorists are working in a different building from the philosophers, who are working in a different building from the practitioners, right? And they're not really talking to each other most of the time. So yeah, so I when I started looking at atomic physics from outside, like after I've left uni, so I've got no attachment. I'm not trying to become a professor. I'm not trying to impress anybody or get a job. I'm just looking at it completely detached. And I started to notice there is this like belief system like underlying all of atomic physics. And then I started looking at the ancient Greeks, and this is actually well known. I'm not the first person to come up with this, but lots of articles have been written about the relationship between atomic theory and like hedonistic belief systems like Epicureanism, things like this. So it was always, the two of them were always linked. But I realized, because in my PhD, I did actually do some rigorous calculations, which were then later verified in an experimental procedure. So it's not that it's all bullshit. And I did a video last month or back in April where I tried to explain this. It doesn't mean that it's all bullshit. It's just that you have the practice, the theory, and the philosophy, and they're all kind of separate. So the practical part of quantum physics actually all comes down to wave equations, or what they call the wave function. And because I've worked with synthesizers and stuff my whole life, I can see now that actually it's just the same math that they use in synthesizers to generate waves and multiply waves together and stuff. So I told you back at the start that I was looking at lithium and what happens when lithium is fired on by a high power laser. So basically, to model that in mathematics, you would have a wave function for the laser beam and a wave function for the lithium. And you essentially multiply them together and integrate them and do some math. And then it'll tell you where the energy is going to go. Like some energy will go like straight up. Some of it will go that way. Some of it goes this way or whatever. It gives you a distribution of what happens to the wave after that reaction. And it worked, right? It worked. So that's fine. But the reason it worked is because it's based on wave equations, right? So, and wave equations are able to describe reality perfectly well. Now, but there's this theory, the theory of particles, right? The theory of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and quarks and leptons, and all these other particles now. And this theory of the model of the atom, and then there's all this philosophical stuff behind that theory as well. And so I try to point out to people that whilst I think the theory and the philosophy is not good, there is still a practical aspect that does actually work at predicting the outcomes of measurements. And when I learned quantum physics, that's actually what I was taught. It's called the Copenhagen interpretation. I was taught that quantum physics is only for predicting the outcomes of measurements. It should not be talked about as some explanation for the whole universe or anything like that. It should only be considered as a tool for predicting measurements. And so I've kind of come back to that now, and I've realized, well, actually, it is useful as a tool for predicting outcomes and measurements. But as a theory of the universe, as a philosophy of life, I think it's not good at all. So that's how I've broken it down.
Okay. But then do you have a belief that the universe is comprised of these with these neutrons and protons and electrons spinning around, these particles? Do you believe there's credence in that?
No, I don't believe any of those particles have been proven to exist. I think they're just, they're sort of reified concepts, if you like. So the electron is said to be the negative charge and the proton is the positive charge. What does negative and positive actually mean? Negative means inflowing. So like when energy flows into something, that's negative. But when energy flows out, it's positive. So I think like the electron and the proton are really just a reification of that process, which would be like an outward flowing versus an inward flowing energy. And the model of the true model of the atom, if you like, or the model that works for everything is the vortex. The torus field.
Yeah,
the torus field, right? It's because so it's got positive, which is outflowing, and then negative, which is inflowing. So it has a positive and negative and a neutral point. But it's actually a dynamic, energetic movement in the ether, not actually particles orbiting around themselves. The particles are like mathematical objects, like idealized mathematical objects. But what does exist is a flow of energy. And I think that flow of energy has been sort of reified into these particles we call electrons, protons, and neutrons. But I don't believe they've ever been isolated. It's just electricity, essentially. Electrons is just electricity, and people who work with electricity have no need for electron theory at all. I mean, ask any electrician whether he ever needed to consider electrons in his work. It's just like they don't. The electricity is treated like a fluid. It's like a fiery fluid, if you like. It's talked about in terms of current and resistance and flow. It's not talked about as like particles, like little soldiers like marching through the wires or whatever. It's only theoretical physicists that talk in those terms, but they don't actually do any practical work. You see, the people who are doing the practical work have no need for electrons. And I've had actually multiple electricians have written to me about this and been like, "Thank you, thank you for saying the electron doesn't exist." So. Yeah, but on the other hand, you have all these physicists, lifetime career physicists who've spent their whole careers modeling the electron or and stuff like that, and it's just like, and I've spoken to them, and like they have no proof that it exists. You see, it's like the existence is assumed to be unquestionable, and then they do all this speculative work about what it might be and how it might behave in this situation and what it might do in that situation and yada, yada. But they never stop to ask, does it even exist? And, I think absolutely not. there's no, and there's a lot of reasons why I think that, but yeah.
But what's fascinating to me, though, is that despite that model being invalid and there is no, from your perspective, there is no atom, there is no particle, the maths that gets developed with that as a premise does have validity. So is it just they sort of happened to have got to the right math based on a false premise? That's where I'm getting stuck a little.
Yeah, no, right. So because it's actually waves. The math uses waves, right? So there's like, how do you specify a particle in math, right? It's like, it's just a dot, right? It's like a tiny dot. I mean, they say it's like indivisible. And you that doesn't actually, you can't put that in your equations, right? Your equations have to have waves in them. So there's this thing called wave-particle duality. This is how they get around this, right? They say that particles are able to behave like waves. So then they just put waves in the equation and it works. And but this assumption that it's a particle behaving like a wave, that's where that's where I think it breaks down. So the wave-particle duality is based on the double slit experiment, and I did a talk recently where I debunked the double slit experiment, and I showed that it's never been done with particles. Right? This is what they tell us, that the double slit experiment has been done with electrons, where they fire electrons one at a time at these two slits, and then somehow the electron then acts like a wave and goes through both slits at the same time and everything. But it's pure hypothetical. Like, this experiment has not been done or proven to any degree of satisfaction. So, I don't think there's particles behaving as waves. I think it's all waves ultimately, waves in the ether. And, so this is a big topic, ether, because that's one of the things that modern science has done, is to completely discredit the ether and throw it out and say that it's old science. And they believe instead that it's a void, a vacuum of space, right? No ether. But when you bring ether back into the equation, it really helps everything fit back together again nicely.
Right. And okay, well, let's talk about ether. So how does it help us in our understanding of the world if we accept that ether exists?
Well, it was common knowledge up until about 100 years ago. And there was this thing called the Michelson-Morley experiment, which they used to basically discredit the ether as an idea and chuck it out of modern physics. But it's essentially the ether is it's a substance. So it's the idea that space is filled with a fluid substance. It's a very, very thin fluid. So unlike water, for example, which is like a thick fluid, very dense, and then you've got air, which is a thinner fluid, that we can move around. Well, ether is like even thinner than air. So thin that it basically penetrates everything. So when you're walking around, you're walking through the air. It's like the air is going around you as you walk, but the ether would be just going right through you. We're embedded in it. So it's analogous to space, to the idea of space, basically. But instead of space being empty, space is actually full of this substance called ether, and this gives actually a scientific basis for spirituality, because alchemy is a spiritual science. It's all about the human soul, and modern science has rejected the human soul, and that happened back in the 17th century. They completely rejected the idea of the human soul. There's no science of the soul. When you go to school, right, you don't learn the science of the soul. In fact, I didn't even heard anything about the soul, to be honest. You know how I learned about the soul? Through music. people singing about soul and stuff like that. What is this soul thing that everyone's talking about? The human soul used to be central to science, and now it's just completely abolished. Because the soul relates to the ether. It's like the human soul is like the child of the ether, right? The product of the ether. But so ether actually gives a scientific basis for spirituality, because now, instead of everything being separated in space, just atoms in a void, we're now all part of a single fabric, a single substance that we're all connected by. And physics hints at ideas like this when it talks about things like black matter. Not black matter, dark matter. Dark matter, like the unified field, space-time, the space-time continuum. When physics talks about those kind of concepts, it's sort of hinting at the idea of ether, which is this unified field that connects everything. So it's actually not a new idea. It's an ancient idea. It goes all the way back, as far as I can tell, just way back into antiquity. I don't know who first came up with it or anything. It was just something that was known about for a long time, until we got this modern science that replaced it with atoms in a void.
And so what aspects of physics, then, is it easier to understand if we believe that ether is present?
Well, I mean, Nikola Tesla, for example, talked a lot about ether, and his inventions were, a lot of it was about harnessing energy from the ether. You might have seen some of the stuff about the cathedrals. A lot of people now saying that the cathedrals are actually ancient technology to harness energy from the ether, and they have this because there's the higher up
of the church, right?
Yeah, I've seen it as well. I was at Edinburgh Castle a few months ago, and I saw one of the highest points. There was like this big spire up on top, and I looked, and there was a wire coming all the way down from the spire, like all the way down and going into the building, right? So there's this sort of atmospheric electricity effect that you can get. So the higher up you are, the greater the potential difference between the top of the building and the ground. And using a metal spire, you can actually conduct electricity like straight from the ether. And it seems they were doing that in some capacity in the ancient world before we had this whole modern electrical grid. that we have. But so within the ether,
I've seen a few videos of people sending drones up and then running a wire down and then sort of charging their phone, and they've done it with moringa trees. I've seen people do and all sorts. Yeah, so there seems to be a lot of people out there experimenting. But I guess this is one example where that becomes understandable if you believe that there is ether exists and that is playing a role in this conductivity.
Yeah. And with the ether, so it's the ether and the four elements, right? So you've heard of fire, earth, air, and water. So when I started reading like the old alchemy books, and I would say old alchemy books, looking back about 400 years, there's a lot of stuff from the 1600s, 1500s, and the 1700s as well that you can access now. And I was reading this, and I noticed that their whole understanding of fundamental science was based on ether, fire, air, earth, and water. And again, I learned nothing about this in physics or at school or anything. In fact, I remember one time I had to come up with a project for my final year, and I said to my physics professor, I said, could I do a project on the physics of fire? And he was like, fire? It's like, that's chemistry. And I was like, all right, never mind. So like, I couldn't even do physics of fire, so like, but fire is so primal, it's so important. It's like, it's not chemistry. It's like, fire is light, fire is sound, fire is vibration, fire is, it's fire and alcohol. Like alcohol is like fire, water. That's why it's like, it sort of burns. You can set it a light and stuff. Acid, fire is much more than just flames around the campfire, right? It's like alchemically, fire is light. It's the principle of vibration, the principle of vibrational movement. Whereas air, water, and earth are all material or substance. The air is a substance, the water is a substance, the earth is a substance, but fire is not a substance. It's a movement. It's called the prime mover, the thing that moves everything else. And so those four elements, they kind of come out from the ether, if you like. There are different types of ether. So the air, the water, and the earth are like different types of ether. And then fire is the vibration in the ether. And I just found really that this was able to explain everything far more effectively than the atomic theory, the nuclear theory, and everything that I'd been taught. And this could be like technology, like things like I found, for example, things that I wasn't able to understand before because it was too complex for me to understand. I could now understand it very simply when I just break it down into fire, earth, air, and water. And a good example is the human body. So the human body, from the point of view of an atomic physicist, the human body is just a horrendously complicated problem, right? Because you got trillions and trillions of atoms all like hanging together by these invisible forces. Like, how the hell are you supposed to know what's wrong if something's painful or something's sore? Like, in my mind, I'm just thinking of like what's going on, the atom's broken, or what, some of the electrons fell off some of the atoms, or did the nucleus split, or some of the molecules broke apart. I mean, how do you fix that? It's just impossible. But then when you actually look at the body as consisting of fire, earth, air, and water, it becomes divinely simple to understand because, we have the fire as our movement. It's like our heartbeat. It's the heat in our body. It's our awareness. And the air, of course, we breathe in the air into our lungs. But the air is also corresponds with our thoughts and our thinking process because the air is like the medium through which we communicate and speak and so on. And then with the water, well, the body's full of water. It's got lots of different kinds of waters, blood, sweat, and tears, like semen, cerebrospinal fluid. And all of these waters, they're your emotions, essentially. All your experience, your emotional experience all relates to the different waters in the body, because water corresponds with emotion. And then with the earth, well, that's all the solid dry matter. So that would be like your bones, your teeth, and skin and muscles and tissue and stuff like that. So I started to just understand everything with much greater clarity and in a much more practical way that I could work with. when I looked at things in terms of fire, earth, air, and water and ether. And there's just been like just no going back. Like since then, I've found no reason to think about things in an atomic way or to think about things in a molecular way. Like the molecules, people talk about molecules all the time, like chemists and drug manufacturers and stuff. They talk about making molecules, right? They'll be like, I made a molecule. And it's like, no, you didn't. You made a salt. You made a salt. You're calling it a molecule, but actually the molecule is just a representation of the recipe used to make the substance, right? So it's like the molecular formula is a diagram that encodes the recipe for how to make the substance, right? Because chemistry is basically cooking. It's basically, they're mixing stuff together and making stuff, right? But they talk about it as if they're like engineering molecules on the quantum scale. It's like no one is doing that, and I stand by that. No one's actually come forward and said I am actually making molecules. It's no, they make it. They're making salts. They're making powders. But they believe that it's molecules. You see, it's a bit different.
Yeah, no, it's a lot different. And as you're speaking, because one of the things that perhaps I have a view of is that one of the gifts of enlightenment and science, modern science, when we think about it, is our ability to manipulate the material world. And so we have this enhanced ability to work with materiality, perhaps at the loss of spirituality, but nonetheless we get this better ability to manipulate our environment. And you're saying, no, we can. Am I right that we can manipulate the environment just as well using our chemical principles?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about really what a chemist uses, they have salts, they have powders, liquids, which is basically earth, water, and air, gases, right? Solids, liquids, and gases. That's what they work with, and the molecular aspect of it, the atomic molecular stuff is all, I would say, just like extra data. That's what I find whenever I'm looking into anything to do with substances and chemistry. All the atomic information is actually useless. You just want to know, like, where did it come from? How did you make it? But if you go and look up stuff, it won't tell you where it came from or how they made it. It will tell you how many electrons it has in its orbitals, or what its atomic mass is, or how many atoms are in 1 gram of the substance. All this kind of stuff, like, just it's useless information, right? It's like you need to know where did it come from and what processes did you use to make it. Like that's the only useful information when you're looking up this stuff. But instead, you get flooded with useless information and numbers that you can't do anything with. As I say, the alchemists invented chemistry, right? Chemist comes from alchemist. They invented all the tools, all the techniques. They knew about all the substances, they knew everything about science, and they did not think about atoms at all. They had no need to think about atoms. And so, yeah, again, now you have like theoretical chemistry. You have people who are theoretical chemists that never actually do any mixing of substances, but just sit around and theorize, just like the physicists, and they get given a lot of credence because they are smart people, but at the same time, they're indoctrinated into a belief system that they don't fully understand, and they're repeating things that they haven't verified themselves.
Right. Yeah. So we've segued into alchemy, and yeah, let's talk a bit about that. What do we mean by alchemy? What are the basic principles?
Sure. Well, yeah, alchemy. I love it. Really, I do, and I'm so grateful to have discovered it because it is kind of hidden, or like occulted, you could say. But it's not hidden like as in, I say, like deep underground in like vaults that you can't access. It's just hidden in plain sight. It's like right there. There's alchemy books in the stores, alchemy books everywhere. You can go online, read about alchemy, lots of websites, loads of YouTube channels. Yeah, it's there, but you're never going to get told about it by the school, the university, Netflix, any of these places. Probably never going to tell you about it. But it's there, and it's been around for thousands of years. And the more I looked into it, I realized, well, they weren't just like some, ancient like gold diggers, right? That's kind of what I was taught in chemistry class, that they were just these mad scientists who were like trying to make gold as quickly as they could, just to get rich, right? And the puffers, they would call them, just sitting there like puffing the fire to make it hotter to try and make the gold. But yeah, the more I looked into it, I realized actually, no, there's this whole like obsession with gold is not what we think it is. In fact, there's a saying from alchemy, which is, our gold is not the vulgar gold, right? And what they mean is like the vulgar gold they're talking about is metallic gold, right? The gold you use for money and jewelry and stuff like that. Like that's not the gold that the alchemists were trying to make. Because actually gold is symbolic. It's symbolic of something which has been worked and purified to its absolute limit of perfection. So alchemists believed in transmutation of metals. So that basically metals had different levels of impurities in them. And if you were to purify metal as far as you possibly can, then you'll get gold. The gold is the end product, the most pure metal of them all. And so gold then became symbolic of the goal of the work. So anything you're making, whether it's a piece of music, music is gold, right? It's like, because you have to go through a series of processes to kind of purify the sound and make it better and better until you get it to this like ultimate like state of perfection, and then that's like your finished song, and then you put it out, right? So lead into gold is symbolic of any kind of creative work where you're starting with base materials, like commonly available materials, and then you're working them through a series of steps to get them more purified, more useful, just better, until you have this like end product, which is your gold. And there's a saying that basically the alchemists in their quest to make gold, they discovered they could make things much more valuable than gold. And so alchemists are actually not obsessed with making gold. I mean, I've been into alchemy for 10 years and I don't even own any gold, I don't care about metallic gold at all. Like, it's totally symbolic. I've got an example of this actually. So I made it. There was a tune I made back in 2009. It's not a head flux tune. I made it for a publishing company, and I made it in 2 days. Right? It was just a job. They wanted me to make some like house music for this thing. I'm like, okay, fine. Knock together this track in 2 days. Usually it takes me months to make music, and I'm like, all right, knock it together, give it to them. And then that tune has somehow just been more successful than almost any other tune I've ever done. And I get royalties every year for it because it keeps getting used on television, on radio, and all these various other places. So, thousands of pounds of royalties every year. I mean, I'm now, it's been 16 years since I made that tune. I get thousands in royalties every year. Now, imagine I'd just taken the gold for 2 days' work, right? A little bit of gold like that size for 2 days' work. But you see, the music is way more valuable than gold, right? It's giving me this passive income for like my whole life, just from 2 days' work. You see, so gold is not the most valuable thing, and that actually, and the alchemists say the real fool's gold is metallic gold, right? If you're just chasing gold coins all the time, then that's what the fools do. The alchemists will actually make stuff that has lasting value. Exceeds the value of gold, basically. So,
right.
Does that answer that question?
No, it does. And so what are the? Okay, so we've established it's not about making metallic gold, and it's about something creating far more valuable than that. But what are the sort of the basic principles of an alchemist? What are we talking about?
Well, the alchemists believed that essentially nature can only take things so far, right? So we have this beautiful nature, I would say, created by God, right? Man didn't create nature. And it's always giving, right? We have the trees, the plants, the rocks, the animals, crystals, gems, everything. Like the earth is always providing generously and giving us things that we can work with. The alchemists believe that actually nature can only take things so far, and that it's incumbent upon humans to actually take the work to its next stage. So, for example, making medicine. Alchemists were the original medicine makers, right? They developed all the tools, the glassware and everything that chemists use and everything to make medicine. It's like making medicine from herbs, for example, is a kind of alchemy. Now, the thing is, if you just go around eating the herbs, if you just pick the herbs off the plant and start eating them, it's not going to have the same effect as if the alchemist takes the herbs and works them through the processes to purify them and make it into the medicine, right? It's like it'll have a much stronger, more potent, more effective because of the alchemy that's been done on it. And it's totally analogous to cooking as well. So like cooking is a kind of alchemy. You use the various alchemical processes. You're working with all the elements. You have your earth, which could be like your food. You have the water that you're boiling stuff in. You use air to dry things, and fire, of course, to heat things. So you're working with the elements constantly when you're cooking, or if say you're doing any kind of herbalist, or like making medicine, making like balms, or anything like that. So making music digitally is just kind of a more like modern kind of alchemy. But the kitchen is really the alchemical lab that everyone has in their house. And it's a type of forge. An alchemist would always have a forge in the laboratory, right? And a forge is a fireplace, but it's not just a fireplace for like warming your hands. It's a place for being able to control fire very, very precisely, because they needed to be able to get certain levels of heat and to be able to sustain those levels of heat for like a long time, like constant heat and stuff. Of course, this was before digital ovens and all that kind of thing. But so we're actually doing alchemy all the time. The processes we use in cooking and making medicine and making music, all these things are actually like modern alchemical processes. But we do it, but we don't have necessarily the alchemical language. It's just every day. It's so common that we don't realize we're doing it.
Right. Yeah. And then we have these stages, right? Negredo and so on, right the way through. So can you talk us through the basic phases?
Yeah, well, there's the stages of the work, but then there's also the processes. So there's like 7 processes. They have with the Negredo and the Albedo, and those are not, well, technically I suppose they are processes, but they're called the stages of the work. To which there's 4: Negredo, Albedo, Citrinatus, and Rubedo. Now, yeah, so, well, maybe before I talk about those, it might be worth just talking about the processes.
Yeah, go for it.
Because the processes are, the 7 of them, and they are literally everyday processes that we use all the time. So like calcination, the first one is really the application of fire. So, whenever you're heating something and drying it out, or roasting something, reducing it to ashes, like charring it, say just drying something out, getting the water out of it. Whenever you're just applying fire gently or harshly, that would be calcination. And then there's dissolution, which is when you dissolve something in water. Of course, we do that all the time. There's then separation, which is when you separate things, which again, we do all the time. When we're tidying, for example, tidying the room, what do? We separate things. We take things that are like and put them with other things. I put all the books with the books, and put this stuff over here with that stuff. We're always like separating. So separation is just exactly what it says on the tin, basically. And then you have conjunction, which is actually when you bring things together and join them into something new. Now, this could be in a cooking sense, for example. This could be like when you've cooked your meat, you've cooked your vegetables, you've cooked your sauce or whatever, and they're all separate. and then you bring them all together in conjunction. You put them all on the plate to make the meal, right? It's like now you have this new thing called a meal from the things that you previously worked on separately. So conjunction is bringing things together. And then there's three more. And then this is fermentation. Fermentation is actually putting new spirit into something. It's like a death and rebirth process. And the reason it's called death and rebirth is because when you do it, like, for example, in making beer or wine or kombucha or things like this, the organic material dies. The sugar is the organic material. It's produced by life. And then that dies and becomes spirit, which is alcohol. But before we called it alcohol, it was called spirit, and there's a reason why it's called spirit, because it's actually volatile, and will just go back to the air. If you leave the lid off a bottle of spirits, right, it's just going to go back to the air eventually. All the liquid's going to leave, as it's a spiritual liquid. And so fermentation adds new spirit and new life into the thing, whatever you're working on. And then distillation. Well, distillation we most commonly hear about in the making of spirits like whiskey and so on. This is a purification of the spirit. So they're heating it gently, and it's vaporizing and coming up the distiller, and then it's like cooling and coming down and being collected. And this sort of separates the spirit into its more dense components and least dense components. And you can get like the most subtle essences can be like extracted and purified and strengthened through the distillation process. And then the final is coagulation. And coagulation is when something spiritual becomes something solid, something material. So a good example is like a crystal. Right, where crystals are come out of liquid or whatever and grow into solid. Or in the case of whiskey, I would say the coagulation is actually the bottling. Right, when when they finish the distillation, it then goes in a barrel where it's then matured for years. It could be a decade, 2 decades, or more. During that time, the spirit is said to take on the quality of the place and the time and the barrel and everything that it's in. It sort of absorbs the qualities of that time and place, and then it's bottled, and then that's when it's actually sold as a product. So I mean, I use the example of alcoholic spirits because they are the best example of where all 7 stages of alchemy are used in industry. If you go and look it up, you'll see like to make any kind of spirit, alcohol, vodka, whatever, they use exactly 7 stages, and they each correspond with each of those 7 processes that I told you about. So yeah, alcoholic spirits are actually one of the most purified alchemical products that we can buy on the shelf.
Yeah, right. And then how does that relate to the Negredo, that sequence, those phases?
Yeah, so the 4 stages, the Negredo and the Albedo and so on, are talking about the Philosopher's Stone, which is you probably heard of this, right, from the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So the Philosopher's Stone is definitely a mystery and a bit of a secret in alchemy, and there's lots of talk about it. But we'll just start with the Negredo and the Albedo. What that means? It means the blackening and the whitening. Now, this comes from let's say the first process I talked about is the application of fire, right? When we burn something, like when you have a fire, when you burn organic material, let's just say wood, it turns black, right? That's the first thing that happens is it turns black, right? So that's called the blackening. The application of fire turns something black, right? Now, it doesn't just turn black. It actually releases all of its volatile essences as well. So like anything liquid or watery, anything airy or volatile like spirits or alcohol or just essences, flavors, all that kind of stuff, anything that's in the material, all that's going to be released when you put the fire, and it will become blackened, and it will eventually become a black ash. Now, what you might notice as well, like if you have like a fire outdoor, you leave it just for going all night. You come in the morning, it's all white, right? It's the white.
Yeah.
The black ash turns white when it's subjected to heat for longer. Okay, and this is called the whitening. And because what they would actually do is this ash, they would take it and wash it using dissolution. So you take the ash from the fire, you put it in water, you dissolve it in the water, and then you evaporate the water off. So then you get left with a salt. And then you do that again, wash it again, evaporate the water off, wash it again. And you actually end up with a white crystal, right? Like salt or, like salt or sugar. So you can actually go from a black ash to a white crystal. And it's, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Yeah. Alchemists would do this kind of thing all the time, because they would work with the ashes of different substances, like different types of wood, different types of organic material, reduce it to ashes, and then turn it into this white crystal. So all of this has a psychological correspondence as well. So like everything in chemistry has a corresponding process in psychology. And it was actually Carl Jung who was the one to really shine a light on all of this. He wrote a huge book called Psychology and Alchemy, and he wrote a lot of other books about alchemy as well. And he made this correspondence between all these processes and between processes that go on in our minds and so on. And so the Negredo, the blackening, is considered like a time of a complete like breakdown of the ego, right? So like when all the things that you usually think about, the things that you usually lean on, the things that you usually depend on, all start to fall away. It's like what they call the dark night of the soul, where, yeah, I mean, this is actually very much what is stimulated in a shamanic ceremony, right? So in a shamanic ceremony, they will take you through the night. So you'll be fasting for the days leading up to it. You'll take a drink of the medicine late at night, say like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And then you'll go through the night while you're on the medicine. And during that night, you'll go to, you'll go through a dark night of the soul, in that like all the things that you used to believe and, depend upon, and all these things that are normally in your mind get like blown away. And you get reduced to just where you're just a soul, you're just a soul in the darkness, just like, and then the morning comes, right? And when the sun starts to come up and the dawn returns, this would be the albedo, or the whitening. This is when the light returns after a long period of darkness. And this is often like the most emotional and most healing time of the whole night, is actually when the sun comes up afterwards, and you realize you've been through this like intense like darkness, and in some cases hell. Sometimes it's like hellish what you go through. But then the light returns, and actually you feel better, you feel clearer, you feel lighter, because you've like purged, you've let go of all this material that you were holding on to, both spiritually and physically. And the light has come back, and it's a beautiful day. And so, yeah, so the Negredo and the Albedo, they are about our personal transformation as well, about how we purify ourselves for healing and so on. And this was simulated in a shamanic ceremony. And then go on. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
I was going to say, and then after Albedo.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a little bit more subtle, and I think more tricky to understand. So a lot of people, there's actually 4 stages. There's the yellow stage, citrinatus, and the red stage, the rubedo. A lot of people just don't mention the citrinatus, and for a long time I just thought that with the 3 stages it was just black, white, red. So yeah, there's like correspondences to the sun and the moon in all this, and to gender and stuff like that. So the yellowing stage that comes after this is supposed to be the masculine energy coming through in you. So it's like basically with the first stage, you've like broken down everything and let go of everything that you don't need anymore. And then in the second stage, you're then illuminated by the light of the dawn, right? So after losing everything, you've got all this light coming in, all this beautiful like morning, this new day. And then the next stages are about then how you then integrate that and move that forward and become like actually a new person, right? It's like, because the whole point is to transform yourself. Like I say, lead into gold is actually about you and your transformation from a leaden man into a golden man, if you like, right? Which would be, because a lot of people will go to these shamanic ceremonies, right? And they'll take the drug, do the trip or whatever, but then they'll just fall right back into their old patterns and right back into their old habits, right? They don't actually integrate. And this is what people say. It's like the integration is the real challenge. And that is the final stages that you're talking about, is actually the integration of the experience so you can become a new man after your transformation, rather than just like falling back to where you were before. So I think with the Negredo and everything, they're talking about the transformation of us, the transformation of our soul. Where it's with the 7 processes, it's usually spoken about more in terms of chemistry or transforming matter.
Right. And then, so after I've had the light, just to continue with the dark night of the soul idea, the citronella is me coming into a kind of golden light as coming out of that whiteness into the gold. And then the rubedo, like the final.
Yeah, well, the rubedo, the red, the philosopher's stone is said to be red, right? Associated with the color red, right? So the reddening does relate to the creation of the philosopher's stone. Now, a lot of people say the philosopher's stone is actually not a stone. The philosopher's stone is you after you've been through this transformation, right? You are the philosopher, right? And the stone is your body. You've gone through this like transformative process, and you've come out a new man, integrated with what you've learned, and you're now at a higher level of human development or whatever. So yeah, as I say, like I admit the yellowing, the redding stages are hard to understand, I still struggle with understanding those. Whereas the blackening and the whitening phase, I understand quite a lot, because I feel like I've been through that a lot in my life. I've had a lot of Negredos and dark nights of the soul and that kind of thing. So I have a more intuitive grasp of those processes than I do of the yellow and the red phases.
I'd heard it elsewhere described that the reddening is related to action, right? That's we're now taking action in this new form, or this transmuted as a transmuted entity.
Well, yes, yeah, that makes sense, because the philosopher's stone is said to have a transformational effect on other things, right? So, this is, in my view, what happens when people do self-healing transformational work like this, is that they start to have a transformational effect on other people, and just by being themselves, essentially, they have a transformational effect on others. And I know lots of people like this. But this is often how you actually end up losing people as well. When you go through this, you'll find there's a lot of people who now just can't speak to you anymore, and because it's like the work that you've done on yourself, they can't deal with, because they don't want to do that work on themselves, right? So It either inspires people to transform, or they just bugger off. They don't want to speak to you again because you make them feel bad. This is it. And I think this is what we have with a lot of these people in the world now. A lot of these like shining lights. They are just being themselves. They're just coming online, talking about their experiences, about how they transform their lives, and that actually helps other people transform their lives more easily. It's we're not born perfect. We don't come into this world as perfect little golden humans. Do you know what I mean? We come in like an ore, O-R-E, yeah, like ore, and we have to be refined and worked in order to become a gemstone or become the gold or whatever it is, right? It's like we are earth, and we need to be refined and purified throughout life. We don't just come in perfect, So this is the healing work, and I'll be honest. When I got into shamanism, I wasn't even really thinking about that. I just wanted to see all the visions, right? I'd read about, I'd read about and heard about people like Terence McKenna and Timothy Leary and all that, talking about all these amazing outer world visions that they'd seen with these psychedelic plants. That's why I got into it. But then what I ended up experiencing was just profound healing, physical, mental, emotional, just being completely humbled by the experience. After the first time I did ayahuasca, I mean, I was still working in the corporate world at that time, and I hated my job, and I just had so many issues with the other people in the office and everything like that. And I went and did the ayahuasca, and it literally showed me what I was like, right? So I was seeing myself from outside myself in the office and how I was acting to other people and everything. And it was a complete inversion. And yeah, so then I went into work on Monday and just apologized to everybody. Everybody I was pissed off with, I just went and apologized for my behavior. And it just healed so much. And, this is where we're at now in the world, with all these people who went along with COVID and were behaving the way they were. Apologies would go so far towards healing the world if they would just say, you know what, I was out of line, I was misinformed, whatever. I'm really sorry for how I behaved. That's how healing. That's how healing happens, on a collective level. So I found that through the shamanic stuff, I was able to take responsibility for my own behavior, for my own things I did to myself, the things I did to other people, and to try and just make that right. But other people don't want to do that, right? There's a lot of people who are just never apologize for anything, always play the victim, just double down hard, and it's just they haven't had that Negredo, right? They haven't been broken open and seen themselves from the outside. Yeah. So it all ties together, the alchemy and the shamanic stuff and psychedelics and everything. Because I couldn't explain psychedelics as a scientist as well as another thing. How do you explain the psychedelic experience if you're a mainstream scientist? I mean, they might try to say, oh, it's this part of your brain is lighting up and this molecule's, joining to this receptor and all this kind of thing. There's no receptors, by the way. I take it from me. I mean, I know a lot of doctors and stuff, and this whole idea of receptors that molecules join onto and stuff. Again, this is theoretical drug delivery mechanism, right? Not actual. There's no evidence of receptor sites and stuff. So a lot of this stuff is just theory and people trying their best with the theory they were taught to explain reality. But I just found that the alchemists already understood how everything worked long ago, and that knowledge has just been lost and hidden.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people listening to this will be in the business world. I wonder if we could step through an example of how we might use alchemy to, say, create a new digital product or create a service. What might be a good example that brings it into that realm of applying alchemical principles or processes?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, I would look breaking things down into the essential elements of what you're working with. What is your fire? What is your air? What is your water? What is your earth, right? Because everything has elements. I know we're talking totally hypothetically here and not about anything specific, but I mean, it can still be applied pretty generally. So there'd be a case of defining the elements you're working with. So in music, for example, the earthy part of music is the drums, the rhythm, right? The kick and the snare, the hi-hats, like that's like the earth of music. And then you have the watery part of music is the bass and the harmony, bass and harmonics. In fact, because without bass, there's no emotion in music. If you take the bass out of music, there's no emotion at all, because you need the bass to move the waters in your body to create the emotional response. And then the air of music is actually the melody or the words, like the lyrics, the communication, like is the airy aspect of music. And then the fire is the energy, the dynamics, like how the music moves, like how heavy it is, how strong it is, how saturated it is, all that kind of stuff. So you're sort of defining the elements that you're working with, and then looking at the processes, the 7 processes, and how you can work them to get your final product. So if you're making something, then it's going to require a planning phase. So that would be your calcination, right, where you're not actually building anything. You're just essentially making decisions. Making the preliminary decisions that you need to make, things that need to be decided, need to be planned, need to be written down, need to be sort of set in stone before you can do any work at all. That would be like your kind of calcination, because a fire is your awareness, right? Your intelligence, your light. It's like so when you're doing that kind of work, using the light of your consciousness to basically set up the limits and the scope of what it is you're going to be doing. And then with the dissolution, well, this is all about getting into a flow, really. So in music, this is when you do actually start to do the work, when you do start building things, and it can be very trial and error. So in music, it would be like, playing music and recording, right? Like, sorry, I played some music there, but just jamming, right? You might not know exactly what you're doing, but you're jamming, you're recording, you're actually doing music. You can't do that until you've decided what instruments you're going to use, decided what the chords are going to be, decided what tempo it's going to be. There's all this work, decision work you have to do, all this calibration work you have to do before you can even start playing music. It'd be the same with any ideas. Like, you have to do a lot of preparation and planning before you begin the work. And so you then making whatever you're doing the work, you're making the stuff. Some of what you make is going to be good, some of it's not going to be good, right? And this is where the separation comes in, right? Separation is about separating gold from dross, basically gold. So that which is good, that which is going to last and do well, you separate from that which you don't want, which you don't need. And we do that in music all the time, right? So that could be like filtering, EQing, cutting, recordings, throwing away that one bit there and keeping that other bit or whatever. Like, lots of separation happens in music making and in any kind of work.
Well, I'm thinking in a digital product, a lot of that might be, okay, this feature nobody's using, this bit isn't working. Actually, we thought that was going to be useful. It's not useful. So yeah, I can apply it there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like software. That kind of thing for sure. Or a book even, I used the 7 steps to make my book as well. That was kind of how I thought about it. And I did separate a lot of stuff. I've got about 30,000 words that I took out of the book, actually. So then the conjunction, okay, well, that's like bringing it all together now. So you've separated out, you've got all your good bits, let's say it's code or whatever, you got your good bits of code. And now you need to like bring all those together into the product, whatever it's going to be, right? Yeah. So that would be your conjunction. So that would be like your beta. Like when you do your conjunction, that would be like your beta version, right? You've now got stuff together. It does something, but it's far from perfect, right? It's like you're still going to have like other stages of refinement before you release it as a public product. So fermentation, I've made the correspondence between fermentation and editing. It's this very similar process like editing, because it's like you're adding new spirit into the product, that you couldn't have done in the original build, right? So it's like stuff that you didn't know you needed until you built it, right? And then it's like, I need that and needs this, and if I add this in here and make this smoother and join this together, all the editing, it's like it's making it better, stronger, and giving it a new lease of life. And so fermentation editing is a big process in music as well. We spend a lot of time editing, like particularly in electronic music. So then you've got your distillation, which I always think of as just like the final perfecting of the product, right? So you could even think that could be like testing with your users, for example, letting it go out, getting feedback, and then putting the feedback back in, and then changing it and letting it go out again. It's like going around the distiller up, collecting it, putting it back in, running it through again. It's like debugging. And in music, it would be mix down, right? So after you've finished editing in music, you have to do a mix down. And this involves basically getting all the sounds and adjusting the volumes of every little sound, every frequency, until you find that exact sort of sweet spot where all the sounds like balanced out nicely, and it sounds like a professional product. I think in a digital coding thing, this would be like debugging and getting feedback from the users and stuff. And then your coagulation, well, that's when it stops being just a project and starts becoming a product, right? That's like the project is like a spiritual thing that just exists in your little world, but then a product is actually like a physical thing that like people are purchasing and using and stuff. So that would be like the coagulation. So you see what I mean? It is like general enough to be applied to any kind of creative work.
Yeah. And that was great fun going through that. And immediately I'm imagining, alchemy for product development as like a new
the alchemy of product development. That's a great idea for a video, actually.
But the metaphors are so rich, in terms of I'm thinking of a whiskey distiller or something in a lab and that being akin to, user testing or so. Yeah, I can see a lot of mileage in that, and how it feels so intuitive.
Yeah,
because I guess humans have been alchemists for a long time.
Yeah, and so I argue in the book that actually the computer is a type of forge. It's like the evolution of the alchemist's forge, because electricity is actually the fire element, and the computer is a device for having precise control over electricity. And that was what a forge was for, but for fire, right? For precise control over the fire element. So computers, they give us, we're basically transforming data. The lead that we work with is data, because data is this like hugely abundant resource that everybody has at their disposal. And the work that we have in front of us is to actually transform data into something useful or something beautiful or something like functional. And then in doing so, you receive passive income. So it's like, so when you make a piece of code or write a book or a piece of music or whatever, you're transforming data through alchemical processes. And then by releasing it, you're then getting passive income coming in, which is the gold, right? It's like, I think we are like modern day alchemists, but we just kind of lost touch with the ancient language of the alchemists. And so we tend to talk more in modern science terms. So I'm just trying to like bring it back, just trying to revive a lot of the old alchemical language, because it's all natural language, actually. They don't have, it's all just names of stuff that are like more or less familiar, fire, earth, air, and water, all the substances and things like that, the processes, they're all stuff that you can relate to. There's nothing like abstract or hypothetical. It's symbolic. Yes, there's stuff that's symbolic, but not just these like abstract concepts like electrons and atoms and stuff. It's based in reality, right? What stuff you can hold in your hand.
Yeah, and what I love about it is how the same ideas apply to us as human beings, and so it's like all of our creative work, we can immediately see how we can take lessons from that into our own evolution and vice versa. It just feels like it's a much more accessible way for us to gain insight from the scientific work we might be engaged in the world, or that others are engaged in. It just feels like it's as a platform for us all exploring the world. We can transfer the insights much more easily, because if a scientist over here has come up with a new molecule that's caused some impact, how do I make sense of that in my own life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you said, the metaphors are so rich. That was one thing I found as well. Is the more I got into this, it helped me express myself better, because I found like everything I needed to say, I could always say it in alchemical terms with alchemical metaphors, whereas I didn't have that same ability with physics. It was like everything was so abstract. If I try to talk to like non-physics people about physics, like their eyes would just like glaze over, right? Because I'm just taking them into this like complex other world of formula and particles and stuff like that they cannot relate to at all. Like, but when you start talking about fire, earth, air, and water, they're like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's like all around me. It's it's right there. So some people try to say like alchemy is like witchcraft and all this kind of stuff, but I've never found any evidence of that. It's like I think the alchemists were, they were real scientists, real artists. They were talented artists, musicians. They were spiritual, and so. But we got all like separated. So now it's like you're either an artist, you're either a physicist, you're this, you're that. But to be all of it together, to be an artist and a physicist and an entrepreneur and, all of it together as one, well, that's what the alchemists were. It was like they embodied all forms of art and science whilst still being spiritual and still being focused on the human soul. So it was all about healing, right? The alchemy, I'll say that it's actually all about healing, because healing the human soul is the highest science that there is, right? It's like, because if people actually heal their souls, then we heal the world. So it's it's a high science. It's where all science comes from alchemy, and I'm really enthusiastic about it. I'm a big alchemy enthusiast.
Right. And am I right, you went back to St. Andrews to give a talk on this?
Not St. Andrews. No. I did do a talk in Dundee University last year. Yeah.
And how did that go down?
It was fine. I mean, there wasn't that many people there, but it was a lady who works actually in the divinity department. I think she has her degree in divinity, and she invited me to talk about this. And she said she was familiar with everything I was talking about. So like I say, so this maybe people in the divinity department understand about alchemy, but nobody in the science department gets it. It's a strange one, but yeah, there wasn't that many people there, but it was, it was good. I mean, as I say, a lot of these ideas have been floating around for a while now, even though, I mean, things like flat earth, even though it's still taboo, I would be willing to wager that almost everyone now knows a flat earther, or they, at least maybe have one in their family or their friend group or something. It's kind of gotten to that stage. So, we need to be able to talk about it. As I say, I mean, it's cosmology, right? Cosmology is actually a really complex subject, and it's okay to have different points of view on cosmology, because there's like a lot of different things that have to be taken into consideration to actually form a view about it. So, I hope we can just get past this whole like globe Earth, flat Earth, like mudslinging contest, and actually just start to develop a more mature type of discussion towards cosmology and respect people's right to actually test their knowledge, right? It's like we have the right to test the knowledge that we were given at university. And if we test it and we find it doesn't stand up, then we should be able to say that and not be attacked for it. But such is the world, though.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, when I hear that, there's a bit of it like, is that not a little naive? Don't all societies have like a set of pretty strictly enforced norms around, how the world is? And is it not always been true that if you go against that, you're going to get,
that is true. Yeah. It's it is the way of the world. And as I say, I was more worried about it back in the day than I'm now. I'm quite used to it, and I started going to the gym as well. Pushing weights.
Right.
I got to say, it's great. I love it, and it's because it's resistance. Actually, I realized like before I wasn't going to the gym when I was a musician and stuff, and I couldn't deal with resistance. I think a lot of artists like that, they don't want resistance, right? Because you're as an artist, you want to be in a state of flow, right? You're always just wanting to like be able to just flow and do your work. And then when people like oppose you and resist you, it's just like, oh, it's so annoying. It's like you're wasting my time. I just want to be getting on with my work. So yeah, I had a sort of fear of conflict because I just didn't want to have to deal with it. But then I once I started like actually pushing weights and embracing resistance as a tool for growth, it just completely changed my perspective on conflict and resistance now. So now when I get people writing to me with their wisecrack comments, I just have fun with it. It's like, so I definitely recommend that to anybody who's like speaking out online or whatever. Like definitely try to lift some weights a few times a week, and it will just make resistance much more easy to deal with.
Right. Yeah. I'm also curious, since writing the book, are there any other quote conspiracies or narratives that you once held that you've now let go of? Has anything else arisen for you?
Well, I mean, just to, so the main original contribution I made to the book, of course, I'm not the first person to think the earth is flat or to disagree with evolution or viruses or any of that stuff. But what I did that was, I think, quite unique was to like join all the theories together. So I proposed that they're all related and built on top of each other. So you have atomism at the bottom. Then after that came the theory of gravity. It was heliocentrism, the idea that we all go around the sun. This came after the atoms, and then they got the theory of gravity. And then after that, we had evolution. And then after that, we had the germ theory, which was the basis of like vaccinations and everything. So what I realized is that those theories are all actually built on top of one another. They're like interdependent. And they all go back to the same philosophy underlying the atomic theory, atomism. And so I had this like image of the Tower of Babel, and like each layer of the tower is a different theory of modern science. As I say, I'm not the first person to debunk these theories, but I think I was the first person to actually join them together in this way. And there's a guy called Mark Gober who wrote a book after this called An End to the Upside Down Cosmos. And he referenced this in his book, and he called it Jung's Framework of Social Engineering. So I now have my own framework of social engineering, which, again, I never set out to do that, but it's quite a good thing to have. So, yeah, because these theories all have social engineering correspondences as well. Like they all have like fear factors attached. So the government uses them to scare you with things, whether it's like nuclear bombs or asteroids and space aliens, black holes, and viruses and all this kind of stuff, right? They're all theoretical bogeymen, right? It's like theoretical bogeymen based on these scientific theories. But when you let go of them, it's quite liberating because you realize there's no bogeyman other than just people. It's just people that are the problem, right? Like, no, it's not nature that's the problem. It's as I believe, evil only exists in the human heart, I think, is what I've come to learn. But so these theories, they're used to scare us, they're used to limit us, and they're used to keep us in the dark about spirituality and life and various other things. So yeah, I felt quite important to talk about this.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, and you are certainly one of the few people talking about, well, those two things, the sort of atomic fallacy, which I hadn't come across before your book, and then, as you say, then that as an underpinning for all of the other sort of dogmas, that modern scientific dogmas.
Yeah,
that's interesting about evil only exists in the human heart. So you're not of the view that evil entities exist out there.
Not at the moment, anyway. I mean, obviously, I'm open to being challenged on that, but yeah, I think it's. I mean, look, it's biblical. I mean, it basically says that in the Bible, right? That evil's just in the human heart. And just from my experience of life, it seems like that. What I mean is that, like, all these other things, all these non-human things that you're scared of, right? Whether it's the viruses or the asteroids or the aliens or whatever, the nuclear bomb, right? It's actually just other people, not all other people, but some other people that are the evil actors in the world. And these are just sort of tools they use to scare us. That's my view anyway.
Well, what I find interesting as you speak now is that if we liken scientism to sort of a modern religion, that has its evil entities, viruses and so on, then that we can't see. And I mean, could we make the case that kind of all religions through time have had to create those as a means of control, and this is just the scientism's version?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, scientism. Yeah, I mean, it is a religion, but it's a religion without a god. Which is, so it makes it unique among religions. But I argue that the atom is actually an idol, and it very specifically is an idol because it's basically designed to replace God, right? So God, the creator, is said to be, that which created the universe and gives life to everything. And in science, we're basically told that that's what atoms do, right? That atoms have come about from the Big Bang and then created molecules, which then created cells and created so on. So everything, all life has come from atoms. But then at the same time, we're told that the atom has within it the power to destroy the whole world, right, with the nuclear bomb.
Right.
So the atom has the power to create and destroy worlds, right, which is a divine power. And it's also structured as a trinity. So like God is always structured as a trinity, a triangle, like the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. And the atom is also structured as a trinity with the electron, proton, and neutron. And they actually correspond. I go into this in my book. It all corresponds. And there's a bunch of other reasons why it's an idol as well. But, it's excessively sort of feared and worshipped and admired and obsessed over. And, the government use it to scare you. And this, so it's like the Bible warns about idolatry. And I didn't start reading the Bible till I was like 40 years old, by the way. But I'm like, wow, there is actually some good stuff in here. Who'd have thunk it, but it warns about idolatry, right? Like putting things in place of the creator and worshiping them instead. And I feel like that is what we have with scientism. And other religions have done it as well. I mean, I'm not religious, I say I read the Bible because there's a lot of wisdom and truth in there, but I'm not religious in that kind of way. But yeah, obviously all religions kind of have their problems and their bad actors and their corruption and things. But scientism was the religion that I grew up with, so that's the one that I'm calling out now.
Right. Yeah. Wow. I just have to say, this is such an energizing conversation, and what I think what I love about the way that you've presented this material is you've given us part one, which is the of the book I'm talking about now, the conspiracies and how it's it's all a lie, and you're like, and so often when we get exposed to this, well, so in my case, it's like, okay, well, now what, right? If everything's not true, now where to go? And but there is another way to look at the world, which is coherent, which we can use to help us navigate our environment and our own development, and that's alchemy, and I love that. You've presented the two.
Yeah, that's what I had to do, because originally I just wanted to write about alchemy, but it just felt, I would talk to people about alchemy and I would come up against the same problems all the time, which was the science that they were conditioned with was sort of blocking them from understanding the alchemy. And because I was also having to go through this within my own self as well. I was having to retrain myself to think like an alchemist instead of thinking like a physicist. So I thought I can't just write a book about alchemy. It would be too disingenuous. I have to actually put some of myself into it. And so it's sort of semi-autobiographical in a way as well, but still focused, on the science. So I thought that's it. So, the first half of the book is the Negredo, right? Because it's the breaking down of all the stuff that you're used to relying on, all the stuff that your ego reaches for, all of that gets broken down. And then the second step is the albedo, which is then the shining of the light of alchemy and just all this like stuff that's like truth, it's just manifest truth. Negredo, albedo, that was the two halves of the book. And then the rubedo, if you like, the reddening is that's up to you, right? After you finish reading the book, it's on you to then take it forward.
Well, that's your volume 2, Steve. That's the citronella and the rubedo is the workbook, right?
Yeah,
a fool's wisdom, the workbook, right? How to apply this in your life?
Yeah, I'd love to write another book. Yeah, I've been a bit busy, but it's all bubbling, and I've been doing a lot of research, and I need to get cracking with the second book pretty soon. So it might be a project for this winter.
What will that be on? I
don't have a solid like title or whatever, but I just have like masses more to say. So I need to go through, the old alchemical processes myself, and dissolve and separate and sort things, and before I know exactly what the second book's going to look like. But it'll be a continuation of the themes explored in the first book. Yeah.
I tell you what, the one thing I'll just throw in terms of my own practical benefit from having read it is when I'm going through a creative process now, and this could be writing a LinkedIn post or putting together a little video or whatever it is, I'm much less likely to to beat myself up about getting into the nuance about should it be this word or should I keep this word. Now that I understand that is part of creation, that's part of the chemical process. Like this is normal. I'm not being like bad at being an artist here, right? This is just part of it. I found that really useful on a practical level.
Yeah. Like, I started a Patreon recently, and it's been quite good having like a space, like a private space where I can share creations that aren't necessarily 100% polished for public release, because it gives, so I'll like make something, make a post, make a music or piece of music or whatever, and then put it out there, and then it gives it a space to breathe. It lets it sort of ferment, if you like, and distill. It's like to ferment something, you leave it out in the air, right? It's like to leave it out in the air, like people comment on it, you listen to it or watch it for a few days, you'll start to get other ideas about how you can improve it. You can make this bit better, that bit better and stuff. So there's a kind of fermentation, distillation happens then before actually making the public release, because when you release something publicly, it's a record, right? It's everything is a record, right? Not just music, like, but every time you release something publicly, you're making a public record that's potentially going to be in the world forever. So, you know, it's good to like give yourself that time to like refine and distill your offering before it goes out, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And like I say, I do think there's a lot to be. Well, maybe this will be part of what your work instigates is more people getting clear on how we can apply these ideas in everyday creative acts.
Yeah,
because
I think we could be like a whole. Yeah, I think there could be a whole creative renaissance actually, with this knowledge, and particularly with like the modern tech we've got now with AI and everything. I think there's a huge amount of creative potential, but there's also like a huge amount of oppression that's making it difficult for people to actually really explore what we can do with all this. But, you know, we're always trying to remain optimistic, even in these difficult and dark times, that there'll be some light at the end of the tunnel.
Hey!
Yeah. Hope so.
But I'm seeing the Negredo Albedo.
Yeah, no, right, okay, yeah. Of course, yeah, we're still going through like a sort of societal Negredo at the moment. Yeah, here in the UK and everything, like it's just crazy. You know, it's just the news and the stuff that's going on day to day. I say it's very heavy led. You know, even if your life is good, I mean, things are good for me at home. My family is good. My home life is good, but you know, outside around the towns and cities are not looking so good. The politics is like really oppressive and tyrannical, and you know, it's tough. But as I say, I think it actually brings out people who are virtuous and people who have something important to say. They're sort of brought to the surface in a way in when things are this bad. You know, it's like, you know, that's how I wrote the book. You know, it was like, because I was just like, what I was seeing in the world was so bad. It was like I had to, you know, do this as a kind of like an antidote. And I think a lot, you know, more and more people are just coming out and just saying what they have to say because they realize there is actually power in just sharing your perspective on things. You know, particularly if you've been if you've been on a journey, if you've been on a transformational process, you started out here, you went on a journey, you realized you were wrong, and then you came somewhere else. Like, just sharing that with people is so important. You know, you can't take it to the grave with you. It's not that's not right. It's like you have to get it out for other people to make up their own minds.
Yeah, touche. That's such an important message. Fantastic. All right. Well, yeah, I know we're coming up on time in terms of how much you could give me. So I'm just so grateful, Steve, for this conversation, for everything you're doing, for the book, in advance of the next book, and the music. I've been loving your music. Head Flux. We should give that a plug on Spotify. Soulfire Mixes, my favorite. But yeah, that's well worth checking out.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a great chat. And stoked that you're enjoying the music as well. That's inspired me. Maybe I'll write some more music this year.
Do it. Yeah. It's really, clearly very talented, and it's great. It's great stuff. Okay, then we'll put a link to the book. We'll make it clear where they can find your music, and anywhere else you would point them.
Just so I've got a Patreon now, so that would be like the best way to support me if you want to have a regular interaction, exclusive content, build a relationship with me and so on. Then Patreon's a good way to do that. I also started paid subscriptions on Substack as well. So so there's kind of a new venture for me. So doing the paid subscriptions. So that would be the best way to support me. But otherwise, buying the book or listening to the music, also good. Yeah.
Great.
You find me on YouTube and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks once again. It's been awesome.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. And
Thank you.
yeah,